So anyway, thank you very much indeed for joining us. So we've got Jonathan Hinkles, who's the MD of Skybus, and Captain Ben Woodward, who's Chief Pilot for Skybus, for their talk today. And they are happy to take questions at the end of their talk. So hopefully you already have engaged through the Slido app, but if you haven't, then you can scan the QR code or go to slido.com and enter the whatever it's called, that code now. And you can put forward your questions. And as before, your questions can be upvoted. So have a look and see if someone's put a question in already that you'd like answered. And if so, upvote it. And try and ask questions that you can't find just from a quick Google search. You've got some good brains here at the front. So please do take advantage of having them at your beck and call for 20 minutes or so. So enough from me. I will hand over to Jonathan and Ben. And thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Karen. Well, very good afternoon, folks, and thanks for joining us for an introduction to Skybus, which is, I think, the UK's most scenic airline. I would say that, wouldn't I? My name's Jonathan. I'm the airline's managing director. But as this is flashing away behind us, you'll see some of what everyday life down in the far west of the UK is about, and how Ben, our chief pilot, and our team of pilots in Skybus go about delivering for the community in the Isles of Scilly every day. So our airline celebrated its 40th anniversary last year. It may well be the oldest airline that you've probably never heard of before today. We'll fix that, I promise. We operate a fleet of 4 Twin Otter aircraft and 3 Britten-Norman Islander aircraft, supporting lifeline services out to the Isles of Scilly. Our main base is at Land's End, which, as the name suggests, is at Land's End, right down in the far southwest of the UK. And the Isles of Scilly sit some 28 miles offshore from there, out in the Atlantic, the most southerly airport in the British Isles. The Skybus operation runs year-round, and the airline is part of the Isles of Scilly Steamship Group, which also, as the name suggests, owns the vessel that operates the services. That's just restarted today for the summer season. But during the winter, we literally are the only lifeline service backwards and forwards to the islands as things progress right the way through. That takes a huge amount within it to make that service happen, and people are reliant on us for literally everything during the course of that, whether it's incoming tourism, which is the biggest source of revenue for the islands throughout the whole year, but everything else ranging from Royal Mail deliveries, so any Amazon parcels and everything. We fly freighter twice a day across to the islands. We fly the newspapers across. We fly people back out to come out for hospital treatment. We do ambulance air charters as well with one of our Britten-Norman Islander aircraft. So it really is a unique mix within the operation. And installed within our Twin Otter aircraft are dog boxes. The Isles of Scilly is a massively dog-friendly destination for people to fly. So it's not uncommon that we have 17 passengers, all seats full, and a dog box full on every flight that we're operating as well. It's a particularly popular aspect of what we do. But overall, we've a fleet of 7 aircraft flown by a total of 23 pilots, including Ben. We've recruited 8 new pilots during the course of this year, which is an unprecedented number for Skybus, really because we're going to be flying a larger schedule of flights this year. So as well as shuttling backwards and forwards between Land's End and the Isles of Scilly, which is about 12-15 minute sector, we also operate to Exeter, which is about a 1-hour flight from the Isles of Scilly, and we start next week to Newquay, which is about a half-an-hour flight as well. And later on this year, as well as our base at Land's End, we'll be opening an operational and engineering base at Newquay Cornwall Airport as well, where a number of our pilots will be based. I guess from a pilot's point of view, hopefully the scenery behind me is speaking for itself in terms of what a good day looks like. And there are more good days than bad days, although it might not feel like it after the winter weather that we have just gone through. But it really is quite spectacular. But from a flying perspective, it's also pretty much unique, I would say, as well, in terms of the way that the shifts work within Skybus. There's no early starts, there's no getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to have to come in for a nice early shift. There's no late finishes either. I think our earliest crew report in the morning is about 7:15 for our first departures. We've typically finished flying by about 6 o'clock in the evening as well. So it's a really civilised level of hours, no jet lag, pretty obviously, and no particularly long days. But also from a pilot's perspective, it is a real element of hands-on day-to-day flying within the operation. You can sometimes find, I worked at Virgin for 4 years where I was looking after the whole pilot workforce in Virgin Atlantic, and you were finding occasionally that people didn't get a landing once every 30 days because they were flying as part of a heavy crew on the aircraft. That isn't a problem that we have in Skybus. You're operating up to 10 flights within a working day, so plenty of very hard-graft, hands-on flying practice, landing the aeroplane, which is actually one of the biggest challenges that people tend to have coming through training, is actually being able to land the thing at the end of the flight, which is pretty fundamental. But there's lots and lots of practice in that within the Skybus operation. So it's literally great fun. Everybody knows everybody as well. So within our new 8 pilots who are just starting to clear now, so we've Rob, Isaac, Tristan. I'm going to dry up on this, but I do know the names of all of our 8 new pilots. So everybody knows everybody within the operation as well, which I think makes a real difference to the family feel that we have within the airline. So it's literally, it is great fun. It's absolutely wonderful to see how that works. Typically within the airline, we expect of our new joiners, probably some, it will be a first step. For all of them, it's their first flying job at the beginning of their career in aviation. I would fully expect that some of them will move on to bigger things in the fullness of time, but some of them will remain with us, progress to command, and be with us for an equally long-term career within Skybus, as many of our pilots have and continue to do. So just to hand over to Ben now to talk a little bit about what we look for, how we go about recruiting for pilots, what we're looking for in that area, and what makes a good Skybus pilot. Ben.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Well, as you can see, you've got the Islander there with its 6-pack of instruments. We don't have TV screens in our aircraft. We don't have autopilots in the Twin Otter, so everything is hand-flown. It's really good fun, really hands-on flying, stick and rudder stuff. And as Jonathan said, the hardest part a lot of the time is for people to land the Twin Otter, especially in a 20-knot crosswind. So if you're flying diamonds and things like that, you can convert. You can have some practice in the Senecas and the Warriors that you might be flying at your training schools. But really, if you can get some time with the 6-pack of instruments, that is crucial for helping you get through our flight training. It's a wonderful way to spend your time. You're going to start at about 8:15 in the morning flying, and you'll be finished by mid-afternoon, or it'll be the other way around, start mid-afternoon. You get time to go and walk the dog beforehand, and you get time to go for a surf afterwards, which is what it's all about down in Cornwall for us. As Jonathan said, a lot of our pilots, it's their first job, but we've had people go to, very recently, to Virgin, to Jet2, to BA. So although it's your first job, it doesn't stop you doing anything else, and it's a real good way to cut your teeth before you go to any of those places.
Then we have the joys of that. This is the Isles of Scilly. So this is backtracking down onto runway 27, literally facing down the hill, run off into the cliffs and the sea. And then as you've completed the backtrack, it's literally swing the nose round to line up for departure from runway 27 over the hill. You can't see one end of the runway from the other. It's very markedly humpbacked runway, which poses a significant number of challenges. Anybody flown in there yet? Any hands? Yep. Oh, far more than I'd have thought. Well, hopefully that's been great fun, but it's it's a pretty interesting airfield from a point of view that both of the runways literally run over a hill. So it really does lead to some interesting conditions, I would say, but also some incredible scenery as we continue through.
It's absolutely spectacular. You're out in uncontrolled airspace, so there's a lot of NDB work that we have to do. You haven't got the radar control that you'd normally have up hit this way. And you're looking after yourself a lot of the time. It's you've got to be very resilient and resourceful to deal with a lot of the traffic that comes through our way. You have to have your wits about you with some of the light aircraft. Some of you might have been those light aircraft. We've got a helicopter that flies in, sorry, that's the competitor, flies into Tresco, so we have to consider them as well. RMP approaches into Land's End, so we don't have any ILS approaches. Again, everything's flown on the dials, not on a flight director or anything like that. So again, really quite hard graft, but something everyone picks up in their first season.
Yeah, and as you're heading back in, Longship's Lighthouse, the first point of land that you hit back into the UK as you're heading back through to the mainland. Shipping channels working away underneath you, and then back in to Land's End. So I think we mentioned our pilots are doing typically between 8 and 10 sectors in a working day. On the Islander, flying as a single pilot on the Britain-Norman Islander aircraft, and on the Twin Otter as a two-crew, captain and first officer operation with that. So pilots typically flying, what, about 350, 400 hours a year?
Thereabouts at the moment.
In the Skybus operation. It does go up during the summer. It is by far our busiest season. But we've also started to see a number of our pilots, and this is an arrangement that we've put in place, heading off out to the Caribbean in the winter on an exchange programme to go and fly. So we've had one captain operating down in Montserrat, flying Islanders for Montserrat Airways over the course of this winter, who then come back to Skybus this summer. So again, a little bit more variety, probably some equally blue seas beneath you as you're flying along in that part of the world, but a very different structure from there. Just before we come on to any questions or any points that anybody wants to ask with us, there's just a couple of things that I probably would say. I think it's been important, and we've been pushing very hard the UK government around changes around pilot training regime. If you go off to university to go and be a lawyer and go into commercial law, then you're able to get a student loan. Your tuition fees are regulated through that. If you go off to be a geologist and then go to work for an oil company, exactly the same. If you go to university to study medicine and become a doctor, exactly the same. It's completely wrong, in my view, that the UK government precludes pilots from being able to access student loans, and more worse than that, charges value-added tax an additional 20% on the training costs as well. It really is a significant blocker. Now, we've been pushing away at the government for this for quite some time, both the previous administration and the current administration. I think it is really, really important that everybody continues to use the voice with their MP to make that case. It's very easy for us to do that with a small group of MPs, but literally, if wherever you live around the UK, you're in touch with your Member of Parliament going, this is just blatantly wrong. It is discriminatory against the aviation industry, and it means that for my chosen career path, that's a real blocker. Then I think it's actually the more voices that we have saying that to your MPs, the better it goes. I wouldn't in any way wish that to be a detractor from everybody, because I'm sure you can go on to continue to have a very happy, safe, and above all remunerative flying career over the course of that. But for a lot of people, it is a real challenge as to how you clear that first hurdle. So continuing to keep pressure on your MPs around getting rid of the VAT on flight training and being able to open up the access to student loans for people wanting to progress a career as a pilot, I think is a two-pronged attack that really we need to see some change on that within our industry for the good of everybody in the room to keep the industry progressing forward. Now, the only other point I would just very quickly make is from past experience is to say, if you are able to commence your flying training, absolutely fantastic. One piece of advice from me would be to say, literally, stage the payments that you're making to your flying training organisation as you go through it. When you pay up front, and if you sort of part with a whole course worth, if you're in a position where you're fortunate enough to be able to do that, a whole course worth of training up front, that money isn't actually subject to any form of financial protection. So the Civil Aviation Authority has, for example, what's called the ATOL scheme. So if you book a holiday, your money is protected. And if anything happens to your holiday company, they step in and refund you. That's an ATOL. You have an ATO, which is an approved training organisation. First three letters are the same, but it's very, very different indeed. And actually your finances aren't protected in terms of what you pay across. So little and often, I would say, in terms of making sure that you look after that. Because I've seen it firsthand, some of the impact on people's career aspirations that failures of training schools like Tayside and Dundee in my previous job in Loganair, that had on some of the individuals who are progressing through that. And I would never, ever want to see anybody in that position again. So if I can just sort of say one bit of advice to please remember in your minds as you're heading away from today, whether it's anything about the scenery or anything, please just do remember to make sure that you look after that financial protection of what you are paying across to the training organisation who you ultimately select to go with, because it can significantly set you back if anything happens to that on the way through. And sadly, we have had a number of those such instances over the last couple of years in the UK flight training industry. So please very much do have your wits about you with that. On that note, I think that covers the core of what we wanted to talk through, but very happy to take any questions and answer any points that have come up. So here comes Karen, armed with the Slido questions, and over to you, Karen.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. Lovely pictures, very insightful talk, and some really good, wise advice at the end there. And I think I'd add to your last comment, and that is when you're talking to schools, ask them what they offer, because some schools are putting something together to help protect. So it's a really excellent question to say, how do you protect my money? Well, how will this be managed? So please do ask that question. It's a really good one. And also, I think it's a really valid point that you make about asking individuals to lobby their MPs, because the schools, the airlines have all been doing that lobbying of the MPs, but actually the larger voice, the greater voice can come from the greater numbers. So if you have that motivation in you, then add to our voice and see what can be done to try and get them to change their thinking on the funding side of things. I think that's a really valid point. I've never heard anybody ask the general public before about it. Apologies for calling you the general
everybody's
public,
got a vote.
Really,
Everybody's
really
got an
point.
MP. That's what they're there for. So
yeah,
please
don't
do
just
use
leave
them.
it to the business.
Please do get stuck in with it.
Yeah.
Because literally, the more MPs who are aware of this being an issue, and this actually in some cases being a blocker to people being able to do what they want to do, pursuing their career, it's crucially important that every single voice is heard in that debate.
Yeah, no, thank you for highlighting that. So, some questions for you, if I may, please. I've gone on to the wrong, there we go. Okay, first one, what's the salary like at Skybus?
Yep, that's...
Sorry, just as the first one there, and it's upvoted.
No problem at all. So we're just completing the changes every year at the beginning of April. The starting salary within Skybus is 32,625, I think. It progresses immediately upon completion of your initial training by another £1,000, and then we've got a run through that takes you up to a top captain's salary now on the Twin Otter is just clearing 70,000 in this year's pay review. So a real mix.
Yes.
There's a few different pay grades within there, depending on if you progress from first officer to also being a captain on the Islander, and then dual flying as first officer on the Twin Otter, and then at the top of scale, the Twin Otter captain.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Do you have any connections with specific flight schools?
We have called up an awful lot of flight schools this year because we had to recruit 8 pilots, and all of the flying schools have been very helpful, particularly Skyborne and Exeter Flight Training, who are local to us, so they were our obvious choice. Yeah,
perfect. Thank you very much. What advice would you give the younger you just embarking on a flying career?
Go straight to Skybus.
Excellent. That was easy, wasn't it? Perfect.
I think if I can just add to that, I would say, no, I don't disagree. I think it's great advice, and thank you, Ben. I think what I would say, there's quite a few people sort of take a view of saying, do I actually spend some time doing a university degree that's completely independent of anything to do with flying, just so I've got a degree? Personally, I'm not a subscriber to that school of thought at all. If you're very clear about what you want to do as a career, go off and get on with it. I've never flown and never been a pilot, but my view was I wanted to go, when I left school, wanted to go straight into the aviation industry for a couple of years and then go to university. That was 32 years ago, and I haven't got to university yet, and never will either, I don't think either. So literally, if your heart is set on doing that, and that's what you want to do, crack on with it. You will get all sorts of careers advice through higher education. And I remember the sort of careers advisor saying to me, "Oh, you want to go into the airline industry? That's a bit risky, lad. Don't do it." It's Bradford, by the way. So that's a bit risky, lad. Don't you want to do something a bit safer, like accountancy? So I kind of said, well, no, my dad's an accountant, and thanks very much. No, it absolutely bores the pants off me, so I really don't want to do that. And then eventually got a careers advisor in one of the teachers at school who sort of said, well, sounds to me like you've got pretty clear ideas as to what you want to do, lad. Piss off and get on with it. So I thought, okay, that's fine. So no, literally, if you've got a view, that's what you want to do. Crack on with it. Yeah. Don't let anybody advise you to the contrary or divert you from that path. If you're clear that's what you want to do, get straight on with it.
Great, thank you very much. So go to Skybus, basically.
Yeah.
The next question, but I think you did cover this slightly, is what is the rostering like with Skybus?
Over a 2-week period, you're going to work 9 days. Every Sunday at the moment is off. That could change in the future depending on how the council over there want to play things. However, it works at about 4 days working and then 2 days off and Sundays in between. So you're rarely working more than 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just on the Sunday point, so the airport in Scilly, there didn't used to be an airport. It used to land on the golf course, and somebody used to ring a bell many years ago when an aircraft was approaching the Isles of Scilly, but they built the airport. But it's been closed for now 60 years on Sundays, and it's something that we're taking a view on, saying, actually, do we need to keep it that way? It's nothing whatsoever to do with religious purposes, unlike some of the islands in Scotland where Sundays is a special day. It just happens to be that Sundays has always been closed. Yeah. But that's something that may change over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. It's a very live discussion in terms of what we're doing with the business, because people, like it or not, do want to travel on Sundays. Yeah. But I think even if we do that, we probably still wouldn't be starting flying before about lunchtime-ish on a Sunday. So yeah, there'll be no very early morning starts on a Sunday. That I think we can be sure about.
Can I come and join you? Wow, we're still getting more questions in. Oh, sorry, I can't do both, so those are not going to get approved. I'm sorry. What does the assessment process look like, and how long will the next recruitment window last? Ooh.
We've just been through our last recruitment window where we hired the 8 that you saw in the last photo. The process generally, it's we arrive at Exeter. We've been using Exeter Flight Training to help us out there. You have a personal interview, there's a group task to follow, and after that there's a fairly simple sim check following a raw data ILS with a couple of other manoeuvres, seeing if you can read an approach plate. So general good stuff.
Excellent, thank you. There's 2 more questions, I think, that have been voted up. So first one, how local do all of the pilots live? Are any pilots needed to be on call?
We have 1 captain and 1 first officer on standby every day, and we have to be within 90 minutes of the airport. So obviously at the moment we're just Land's End as a base. That's as far away as about St Austell. However, when Newquay's a base, that you could almost be in Plymouth and you'd be within the required distance for standby.
And why wouldn't you want to live there anyway?
Exactly.
Said the Cornish lass in the room, but yeah. Thank you. And then the last question is, what would you say are the best bits about flying for Skybus?
Stick and rudder. If you love flying, we have no autopilots, we've got no flight directors, everything is manual. You've got to have that coordination to actually be able to fly the Twin Otter and land it properly. If you can do that, you're going to love it, and it's just a fantastic place to fly, the Isles of Scilly.
I just saw the last question actually that came in that I haven't cleared through, was what's really different about flying for Skybus, and I think you've really summed that up with your enthusiasm, talking about the stick and rudder and the lifestyle side of it, and the actual the views and all the scenic flying. The UK's most scenic airline stuff is fabulous. So. Thank you so much, both of you. That was fabulous.
Thank you for having me.